Hello and welcome to TAA Conversations on Art and Peace, a series by the Art Association dedicated to exploring how art, in all its forms, fosters connection, healing, understanding, and peace across cultures. I'm Samuel Lowen, president of the Art Association, a Swiss-based nonprofit committed to encouraging peaceful engagement through art in all its forms. Today, I'm honored to welcome a truly multidimensional guest whose work reflects that mission, Fabian Muzik. Fabian is a genre blending artist whose music spans hip hop, jazz, country, dance, and R&B. He's a vocalist, a composer, a percussionist, producer, and creative entrepreneur. Over the course of his career, Fabian has earned over 10 top 100 chart hits across a range of musical styles, establishing his respected presence in the global music scene. He's a deeply compassionate human being, recognized for his commitment to service through honors, including the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Black Political Caucus in the U.S., an award granted to individuals who demonstrate a sustained, dedicated, community uplift, and meaningful social impact. In addition to his musical achievements, Fabian has created In the Den, a podcast devoted to honest dialogue, healing, empowerment, peace, and the transformative power of storytelling. Fabian, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Sam, what a great honor it is to be here today with the Art Association. I'm so excited. When I was alerted that you were interested in hearing my story and broadcasting it to your audience, I was more than elated to be able to service all of your people.
Well, on that note, we're going to jump right in, take advantage of the opportunity to get your insight. How did you get into the music production and everything you're now involved in within the music industry?
Wow. So to fully understand just a glimpse of how I got started, we'd have to go back to Ohio in the United States, where I started my humble beginnings. Lower middle class family, raised by a single parent, being my mother. Father was in and out of my life growing up. And so I experienced, make some choices to experience life in a way that I really didn't have to, but I felt a community throughout the streets and the brothers and sisters that would, look out for me on the block and in the city. And when I found that group of camaraderie with the brothers and sisters, it ended up leading me in a really dark pathway of street gangs and crime at a very young age. Started probably around the age of 12, 13 years old. And so I experienced a really rough life. Sometime around the age of 15, there was a gentleman who was a police chaplain who used to reach out to me, and he said, "Man, you got so much talent and you're wasting it all in these streets." And I used to look at this guy and take him as a joke because we were on two different stratospheres, him being the clean cut, police chaplain, and me being the street guy, real rough edge and didn't have time for laughs and jokes. But at some point in time, throughout my journey in the streets, those experiences started to beat me down mentally. And although I was very respected and very well known all over, I had become very well respected in that manner. It started to weigh on me very heavily, all of the pressures and the expectations of living up to that aura in the streets. And those words that gentleman has spoke over my life throughout the years of interacting with me in the streets started to make sense the more that I was thinking about it in my private reflections. And so I ended up turning to music by the recommendation of my older brother, who was always into music and acting and sports. And he was my main influence because of the lack of the father figure in my life. And he per se was my father and taught me how to play sports and taught me how to do a lot of things. And he influenced me into starting my music to get away from the street life and to try to better myself for our family. And, started out with a singing group, and the singing group went pretty well and started doing some local shows and getting noticed. And the gentleman who was producing all the records at the time, I was a street guy. I was just learning how to sing within that first year of getting into music at the age of 16. And it was about a year later that the gentleman, due to family circumstances, had to move back to the Carolinas, and I was left with all of these projects and concerts booked, but no music to perform because I wasn't a producer. So I took it head on as a challenge, and I said, I'm going to learn how to produce this music. And I started renting these beat machines from a local music store. And I remember the gentleman at this facility telling me, if you want to learn anything about music composition, you have to understand blues, jazz, and gospel, because a lot of music is rooted off of those three genres. And once you perfect those chord progressions and the structure of the music, then you can almost produce anything else that you want. So I did my diligence and I went to the library. And at the time, we had nothing but cassette tapes and Rolodexes at the library. So I did my research. I started renting all of the jazz music that I could, the gospel, the blues, and I started learning just the crash course. I didn't even read any books. And I would study the music and break it down compositionally. And the more I rented the music machines, the better I started getting at learning how to run the equipment and really diving into the entire lifestyle per se, because music is a lifestyle. And that's what I started to understand that when I got involved with it. And it wasn't a part-time hobby to me. It was a full-time dedication and a lifestyle that I would wake up to. And the more I started to learn those machines, the owner of the music store started to catch wind of all of the noise I was making in the music scene underground. So at one point, when I took the machine back on a Monday morning after renting it for the weekend, he asked me, "What are you doing with these machines?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on an album." And he goes, "Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about your music out in the streets, and I heard you're pretty good, and I want to come check you out. So let me know next time you perform." And with that, I took that as inspiration to say I'm doing something right. And I notified him that I was going to be performing. I did a major solo performance after the group thing, and because I was still performing the group songs while I was working on that new album for the solo project. So when I got the solo project ready to go, I did a debut concert opening up for a major group. And that first performance was in front of about 1,500 or 1,800 people in a little small private venue that was really, really nice and intimate. You got a chance to interact with the fans up close and personal. And he made his appearance at that show, and he was in tears that concert. And after that, he pulled me to the side and he says, "Hey, don't let anybody know what I'm doing," because he was the owner of the music store. But he said, "Meet me at the warehouse," which is where they had all their gear. And he says, "Something in my heart's telling me to give you this machine." And it was a brand new one of the previous one that I had been renting. So in his heart, something told him, this kid's special. He's got a gift. He's got something to offer to the world. And I was saving my money up to try to buy one because these are thousands of dollars. And I was just a teenager, and I was, working part-time, doing the co-op program where you go to school half a day and then work half a day. So I was saving my money up, but then I was able to utilize some of that money towards purchasing the first copies of the album when I had it mass produced. So the only way I knew how to do research is go right back to the library. I went back to the library. I found a company out of New Jersey that was able to mass produce the final recording that the gentleman who owned the music store ended up paying for. Once he seen that concert and he seen the momentum and the work ethic that was taking place, he called me again to the music store and he says, "I want to record your first album. I want to be a part of this process." And everything was happening so fast, Sam. Within the first year, this happened for me. And I found that company out in New Jersey. I sent them the first bit of money, did a photo shoot. I mean, mind you, I'm a street guy, so I'm trying to resource all these people, photographers. This is way before the age of the internet, of course. So everything was a lot more difficult to find. You either had to go on what we call the yellow pages in the States or the library and find your resources. And so I did that and got my first poly wrapped copy of 1,000 tapes. And with that, I went to every local music store and I understood. I don't know if it was in my genes or where I got this from because there was nobody in the world that taught me to hustle. And I just knew I had to get the word out for the project to sell. So I went down on every local storefront in my hometown of Findlay, Ohio, and I put an 8 by 10 Microsoft Word flyer with the album cover said, "In stores now." And by this point, my story of being in the streets and turning to music had already become such a known phenomenon that I landed on 3 national television shows. And it was, so the word was spreading rather quickly within that first year. And I did a consignment deal. This is when I started learning about the business slowly, because I had to understand what consignment meant. I'm a street guy. They have a very limited, terminologies that I was using back then. And my level of comprehension of the business world was like nothing. I didn't understand how to conduct a business deal. So the record stores were gracious enough to allow me to do these consignment deals because they heard my story all over television and in the newspapers. And I was doing 80-20 deals, 80 to myself, 20 to the record stores on the secular stores. And then the niche stores, the mom and pop stores, I was doing the 70/30s. And so ended up selling 10,000 tapes within that first 8 months of that year. And that landed me a huge opportunity with a local label in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And everything spiraled so quick. I mean, it was just unbelievable. You know, people always say right place, right time. And I firmly believe that, but I also believe in preparation for the moment, because a lot of people tend to think that practice doesn't make perfect. And then when the opportunity is presented, they haven't practiced enough and they're not perfect enough to get that opportunity to materialize into something much greater. And I felt that everything was going it was going in my favor and I couldn't do wrong. And 6 weeks later, after that initial label meeting in Fort Wayne, I ended up doing a deal with Maurice Starr Enterprises and Sony BMG, and that was the changing point of my life.
Wow. You know, what I hear is determination. I hear intelligence. I hear the ability to listen, the ability to follow through and to be trusted and to trust. You are and you would have been a good partner to anybody that wanted to reach out to you because you delivered the goods through hard work. You held up your end of the bargain and you just happened to be talented and you were able to fuse that rich background. Some others might have complained. You infused it into your talent and you shared it with the world. And that's incredible. What a wonderful formation that you only learn on the streets and on the job. And bravo. It makes you to who you are today. And I believe that many people will consider that an important additional insight into an artist they really enjoy. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to, but also there's this other aspect of you that I want to explore, if you allow me. You've been recognized
Absolutely.
for your humanitarian efforts. How do you see your creative work as part of that ongoing commitment to service?
It all goes back to the roots. And by saying roots, meaning the streets, I had a lot to do with. I'm very passionate about the people who grew up with less than, very passionate about the younger generation who is being led and guided by a group of mentors professionally, leading them to the wolves. And these young children are uneducated, they're financially unstable, they grow up in less than desirable conditions, whether it be in the projects or public housing. And I experienced all that. I had the opportunity, or the dysfunctional opportunity to experience that. However, I was able to mesh that and weave that and take those oranges and turn it into a beautiful juice, and then understand how to market that juice.
Yeah.
So when I started to really stray away from early in my career, which, you look back and of course hindsight is 2020, but I remembered going back to the same streets that I used to run when I was in the streets, when I was a young boy. And I literally caught like an out of body experience. It was so spiritual for me because I went back to my roots. And for years and years, I avoided going back there. And, going back in the same parks where I was running around doing very bad things to other people. And I caught an out of body experience in a spiritual healing moment where I see myself as a young child going through the parks with the firearms out of the open and all of the gang attire and just living this life that I thought I was going to die by. And I saw these other children next to that vision playing innocent as young children in the park. And I thought to myself, I am indebted to these streets. I have a responsibility to sow back into the communities wherever I touch down because I have made it. And I'm truly grateful and I'm truly humbled by the experiences that I've been allowed to be a part of professionally and, personally, because there's many people that I've seen die by the gun being the places that I've been at. And I've been fortunate enough to not only help so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of children all over the world by reaching out in humanitarian efforts and partnering with different food banks and people that own companies that donate thousands of tons of food every year and partner with them to allocate those to certain cities so that we can help feed the misfortunate over there in those areas. And that's really and truly where my heart is at. And the latter part of my career, I really started to see the picture a lot more clearer. In the beginning, I was focused on the music and establishing my foundation, my respect with the peers of what I was involved with, whether it be music or movies or anything of that nature. In the latter part of my career, I'm seeing the importance of touching the world and bringing global peace, love, and harmony amongst every culture. And that's one thing I can truly say growing up in the streets as well as I was able to experience growing up around different cultures. And in the city that I grew up in wasn't a very harmonious place of many races, but the places that I traveled to when I was in the streets taught me that. There's Chicago and there's Detroit and there's Columbus, Ohio, here in the States where there's a multitude of races. And by understanding and embracing those cultures and not repelling because I didn't understand, I wanted to learn more about those cultures and I wanted to embrace them and see how I could, impart some love and peace and healing into that situation. So that's certainly translated into being able to sow back to all these communities, speak to all these different independent boys and girls clubs all over the world, and just be a motivational platform to help utilize my knowledge and wisdom in the entertainment world to give back to a lot of these children who aspire to do the same.
Hey, Fabian, you launched an incredible podcast, and it seems that that is kind of relevant to what we're talking about right now. Can you give us a little bit of insight on In the Den, which is truly a
Yeah.
space for real talk and healing? Give us a little more insight into what you're accomplishing with your podcast.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a long journey and there was so much thought and energy and effort and resources that went into this journey. So many people think, oh, I'm going to start a podcast and turn on my cell phone or a webcam. And because of, the level of entertainment that I had risen to, I had thought about it long and deep. And I did a lot of market research on who was doing what in the entertainment space. And I said, I'm different and I don't want to be like everything else that's already available from the entertainment perspective. And there's so many people who bicker about meaningless topics on the internet when it comes to these podcasts. And I felt a responsibility again to help educate and heal and bring understanding and wisdom, knowledge to the people that need it. Because we live in a lost and dying world, not because they don't know the answers, but well, it's because of a lack of knowledge. And if people don't know, they always say in the streets, if you knew better, you would do better. And it's so true all over the world. Like, if you don't understand the environment or the atmosphere that you're in, you may do things that are offensive to other cultures that you don't even understand cross the barriers. So you have to understand where you're at and who you're dealing with and what to do, what not to do. So all of these thoughts went into the development process of In the Den. So when I first started, I said, man, I have a really deep understanding of the musical entertainment aspects of the world and how frequencies are a large part of how we move around in the free space. And without getting philosophical or too deep in science, I started to try to break things down on a layman's terms so that people would understand that we are physical beings and we carry this energy about us, and which is what gravitates us to specific individuals. When we walk in a room, we just know that certain people are a perfect mesh for what we stand and believe in and what we represent. And there's some people that will try to deceive you with words, but your frequency understanding will never lie to you. And that's what's really allowed me to navigate through all of these dark places, knowing the atmosphere and understanding people's intentions before it actually unfolds, or having that sixth sense of knowing something bad's getting ready to happen. I got to get out of here. Just understanding my atmosphere. So I started to break it down in layman's terms and even show some scientific videos on how this is applicable to everyday life. And I'll tell you what, I never in a million years would have dreamt that we would start out a podcast off of the research, a 3 year time span. And by the third episode, we were getting calls from the network to broadcast over Roku and Dish, in which 23 episodes reached over 103 million homes, and which we are so indebted to the network for. And so the second season that we're gearing up for right now is what we're putting all of our collective energy into. And the second season is really going to break the camel's back with the guests and the explosive topics that we have on board. There's a lot of other individuals doing some exposés and things on other celebrities and things, but my approach has always been education, empowerment, and healing, love and peace, and global unity. Because if we don't teach other cultures on how to embrace one another's likes and dislikes, then we'll never learn from one another, and we'll always be ignorant in our own right. And there's so many people, especially in the United States and in the Western world, is that once they grow up being taught generationally by their grandfather or their father how to do things and how to think, their thought process never evolves from that. And so it becomes a generational curse. And that's something that I've made my life mission upon, is trying to break down those walls and those barriers so that we can all come together for the common cause of humanity.
And one of the tools that you're an expert with is music. So I'm going to ask you the question: how do you think, what role does music play in encouraging peace in individuals, communities, and across cultures?
Well, I know one thing is true that we all can relate to, regardless of language barriers. If we watch a cinematic picture unfold without a soundtrack, our emotions are not provoked. So, with that being said, the music is the platform that drives our emotions to understand the visual. So, we can tell people all of the greatest tidbits of knowledge that we want to teach them, but if their heart is not prepared to receive that knowledge and their mind doesn't have the ability to comprehend what we're giving them, then it's useless information. So I see a lot of people in this generation going through reels left and right, and they see everything on TikTok or they see everything on social media, and they think, "Oh, I know how to do that," or the 50 Laws of Power. I read that book, and but then they're still living in a less than desirable condition, and they haven't accomplished much of anything. And I know that music has always been the common ground to unite all of those cultures, whether it had been, in Europe, whether it had been in Russia. There was things in Russia that I did that music was able to open up the doors for different collegiate investments that I made where they couldn't afford the criterion for the students to go to college. And we were able to use music as the opening conversation to provide them with the right tools. And that music is such a powerful force that when understood to its fullest potential, and not just driving the force in a nightclub and making 3,000 people bounce up and down, or, I remember performing at the Auburn Street Festival in front of 250,000 plus fans. And one of the most memorable moments of my life was just hearing the interaction of the acapellas, or the lyrics being reflected back towards the stage. And I made them cut the music because I wanted to hear that reverberate in the streets. And I'm looking across the crowd, and I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces from television, and as well as the entertainment world and sports. And I'm just seeing the commonality of the unity amongst all of the cultures and the love of music. And that's one of the main reasons why I started the moniker in 1997 of Muzik, being Fabian Music. And I started the branding, I am Muzik. And as a result of that, I mean, just sending out a million, my PR team was sending out a million emails a month. And when the newsletters were big, before social media hit, way before MySpace. And we would send them updates to everything we were doing on the road with the tours and concert dates and all this stuff. And I just remembered all of these different areas being so unique. I would do my market research before we pulled up to their doorstep, because a lot of artists don't understand the same set doesn't work everywhere. You have to understand the region. You have to understand the people, the mindset, the social, economical barriers that they're going through in that area. And with that being said, that music can control the narrative of how you reel those people into that space so that their heart is prepared to receive what you're getting ready to give to them.
Well, the Art Association's mission is to encourage peaceful engagement through art. And what you've just eloquently outlined is the incredible role of the artist, yourself in particular, in creating that moment of oneness across 250,000 people. That is a huge first step to understanding, empathy, oneness, and peace. So I can imagine that would be a charging event for you in regards to getting that type of feedback as an artist, showing the impact that you're having in real time. Bravo. Excellent. So listen.
Well, thank you so much.
Season 2 of the podcast. What else is going on? Anything else you want to share with us that we can look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm slowly but surely making the transition into television and film. And I started to, take my talents up to another level. Music has always been challenging for every project. Sometimes you have a template that's laid out from the publishing companies, the record labels. Sometimes they allow you to just do your thing. However, cinema has always been very impactful to me in terms of being able to go back to the foundation of the message that you want to portray, and then also being able to have the knowledge to score it the way that you see the message coming to light, so that it resonates with your audience deeply. And because of my empathy in the streets and the people that grew up in those environments, I was able to secure a couple of big scripts that I took to some powerful relationships that I had that are now being funded. And these scripts are legendary events that actually happened in the United States. And these stories have not been told for, over 3 decades, because there was, there was a gag order on the story for so many years because of all of the pain and the deaths and the dismay that it caused those people in the inner cities. However, the turnaround to those stories is being able to show the children of this generation, this is what transpired when you're uncles and fathers and people were growing up before you in the streets, but then we're able to take that message and turn it around and use it as an example for them not to regurgitate and reciprocate what their fathers did. So again, we're going right back to that generational curse, finding the roots of what caused our people to want to grow up like this, and then giving them a solution on how to make it better and to bring unity amongst those cultures. So I'm very excited about that.
Worthwhile project, waiting with anticipation. Much success. Finally, what message would you like to share with the Art Association's international community of artists for peace?
I would say the word that always jumps out of my heart is be genuine. Be yourself. Be one of a kind. There's no better version of yourself other than you. I know you may be inspired by a lot of other artists. There are so many incredible artists, I mean, all over the world for different things, whether it be sculptures or building custom cars. And, I think an artist is always has the creativity wheels turning in their head. And I know many of us artists have a hard time even going to sleep at night because when you lay in the bed, even when you close your eyes, your wheels are still thinking about creative things that you're going to do the next morning when you wake up. And it's always been a thing amongst the greatest creators in the world. But what stunts people from reaching their fullest potential and their destiny is not being genuine. And I think too many people, especially in this generation, they watch a reel of their favorite artist, or they look at a picture, or they see some artwork of somebody who's in their field of expertise, and they think, "Oh, I'm going to mimic that style." And I think it's the biggest form of flattery to imitate someone, but only for the originator. It's not a form of flattery for the person who's trying to imitate the original. So being original, being genuine, and being transparent and honest with yourself will allow you to be honest with others. And so many people are, and I say honest with yourself, meaning don't lead your conversation or your aura with ego or narcissism. There's so much of that going around. People believing in their own hype and believing in their own gas, I should say. And that's one thing I've never been a big fan of, and I've turned down many huge projects because of it. And I would always tell the clients, leave your ego at the doorstep, because if we're going to be in here tongue wrestling for 2 hours about accomplishments and who's right and who's wrong, the fans will never get what they're looking for. The chemistry is not going to be right, the vibe is going to be off, and the energy's not there. So be genuine and always move with love and peace and understanding.
Fabian, thank you for sharing your inspirational voice, your journey, and your insight with us today. Your work is a powerful reminder that music and all forms of creative expression can serve as a bridge to inner, community, and global peace, and a force for inner and collective healing. Infused with your love and human empathy, your music stands as a testament to how art can become a lifelong force for good. To our global audience, thank you for being with us. Until next time, stay creative and stay connected in peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a cut.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.